he just went low. He's in his hand. He's in his hand. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Man 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. So we do have to talk about, obviously, the Giants. We do have to talk about the Titans women's team, and obviously the men's team is back from the bye as well. So we got to talk about them too. So I wouldn't say it's an action-packed episode of How's My Team, but it is going to be a little bit longer than the last couple of weeks. So let's get started with the Giants. So it's Sunday. Just finished watching Saturday night's main event. Obviously, that's sports entertainment. That's not actually sport in terms of wrestling. Keeping up to date with AEW All In Texas as well. And we got to talk about the Giants first because obviously it is Sunday. The Titans women's and men's team. Both of those teams do not play until later this afternoon. So I'm recording this on the Sunday, just the fact that obviously I got to edit this pretty early. So we're going to talk about the Giants first. And they played at home and they won against the Cats. That's the second time they've won against the Cats this year. Second time in the home and away season. They won by 26 points, 111 to 85. 17 goals 9 to 13 goals 7. It was a very competitive match. Obviously, the Giants were behind a couple of times during the game, especially towards the end of the first quarter. It was 4 goals 2 to the Geelong Cats, to 2 goals 1 to the Giants. But after that, realistically, they had a flurry of goals in the second quarter. Obviously, Geelong kind of hit back at the end of the second quarter towards the end of the first half, but then since after that, pretty much the defence in the third quarter held the Cats to 2 goals 2 in the third, whereas the Giants scored 5 goals 3 in that time as well. So that kind of was the outstanding factor in that. Obviously, they scored 5 goals 1 in the last quarter, and the Cats also scored 5 goals as well, but kept that margin. They did let a couple in towards the end of the game. I feel like the Giants could have won by a lot more. Obviously today, a lot of the games that are playing today are teams outside the top 8 at this point in time. So the Giants will stay in 7th position with a win. Obviously, Fremantle also won. Hawthorn lost very closely to Fremantle, but the Western Bulldogs obviously lost to Adelaide on Friday. So they were the team that actually dropped right out. I think they went from 5th or 6th right out to 9th. So all the teams from 4th right down to 8th are all on the same amount of points, all on 44 points. It's only just percentage, and obviously Fremantle obviously have the worst percentage in teams in the top 8, but the Giants are not that far away. It's 113.1. So kind of a little bit of a build of percentage in this game as well, obviously with a win, but could have been a lot better than that, but it really much caps off the last month, because they've obviously won at home, they won against the Eagles, so the last month, so since they played Port Adelaide in Canberra, they've won 4 straight with the bye in between the 2 wins each. So fantastic result for the Giants. Obviously, Jesse Hogan was obviously back for this game. He didn't, have an effect on the scoreboard nearly as much in previous games, but obviously Cadman stepped up. Aaron Cadman scored 6 goals. Fantastic result for him. Like he was playing out of his skin. I think it's going to be 6 goals, 1. I think Jesse had 1 goal, 2. Darcy Jones had 1 goal. Shannon Neal on Geelong side scored 5, so it's good for them. Jake Stringer ended up having 4 goals too as well. So very important that, and it looks good for the Giants in the fact that yes, Jesse Hogan, obviously, the Coleman medalist from last year, obviously kicked the most goals in the season last year. Despite him not having as good of a day on the scoreboard, and especially in terms of some of his possessions. Obviously, he played a pivotal role in some of the possessions that obviously we had that ended up contributing to scores from other players on the team. The fact that he might not have had a really good day in front of goal, and like other players like Jake Stringer obviously stepped up. He got 4 goals. I think that's the most he's scored in a game for the Giants so far. And Cadman obviously having his best game so far in his young career as well. Obviously, today just signed an extension at the Giants as well. So fantastic result, fantastic 24 hours for him. But having those players around him kind of step up a little bit kind of helps a lot of things when Jesse is not firing, and that's good. That's good for a team because ultimately, you even seen it, and you've seen it in, obviously not related, but the Essendon game last night. A lot of the traffic went to Caddy for the forward line for Essendon, especially in those last couple of quarters, like the last 2 quarters. A lot of traffic was going to him, a lot of kicks were going to him, and obviously Richmond only had to shut him down before he got possession to kind of neutralise Essendon's attack there, and they did that. They did that well. Obviously, Richmond did end up winning that game, which was a fantastic result for them. Obviously, they're still second last, but only just because of North Melbourne's draw with Brisbane earlier this year. So it keeps them in contention. Obviously, West Coast, that probably means that they have the wooden spoon again. For the second time in 3 years. But for them, ultimately, I will say, the fact that it's not just one-way traffic to Jesse Hogan all the time. There's a lot of players on the team that are scoring goals, which is great for the Giants because especially if they want to make a meaningful impact in September in terms of finals. Obviously, we don't have finals solidified right now, and I don't think any team really has it right now. Obviously, Collingwood are on 56 points at the top, and the difference between that is 3 wins, I think, from 1st to 8th at the moment, I believe, if I count that right. No, 4, sorry. I am correct, yeah. Sorry, I am correct. It is. It's because obviously to Western Bulldogs who are in 9th, it's 16 points. So that's 4 games that Collingwood have to drop. But then most likely, probably if they win next week, I believe Collingwood might be confirmed for finals at this point. It just depends on how obviously the hierarchy of the top 8 kind of works out next week. But fantastic result for the Giants. It puts 2-0 in the home away season for the Cats, and I think that actually makes it 4 in a row, I think, against the Cats, whether it's at home at NG, which is the first time they played there since 2020, Geelong, and away at the Cattery, and I think at the MCG as well, might be included in that, but so I think that makes it 4 in a row against the Cats, which is fantastic for this team. Relatively, a lot of players are relatively young players in this team, or they've had a couple of years under their belt, but not a lot of games. With obviously Jesse Hogan, Jake Stringer, obviously Lockie Whitfield's 250th, so it was a fantastic result for him. Congratulations on 250 games. Obviously, he's the 3rd Giant to do that, behind obviously Toby Green, who did it a couple of weeks ago, and obviously Callum Ward as well, who did it also a few weeks ago as well, before his injury. So, fantastic result for him. Congratulations on 250 games. It is going to be a shortish break. It is going to be a 5-day break for the Giants, because they do play on Thursday nights at Marvel Stadium against Essendon. Now, obviously, Essendon were embarrassed by Richmond last night. They were lost by I think it was by 10 points last night. We'll have a look. Give me a moment. I can have an option to check other games. So let me have a look. 9 points. Sorry, 9 points, but relatively close. So they kind of got embarrassed by Richmond. Obviously, Richmond running second last. Essendon not doing great right now. They're in 13th right now. And it's only because they had a few wins early on. They kind of helped them a little bit. But they're hanging on to trying to keep out of that bottom four position right now, because they're only a win and a half, actually even just a win outside win and percentage, and even then their percentage is worse than Melbourne and St Kilda, who are just under them, that have still got to play yet. Obviously Melbourne are going to play North Melbourne today, and St Kilda are going to play the Swans as well. So either way, in that situation, if one of those teams do win, one of those two teams in Melbourne or St Kilda, or both of them, Essendon will drop under them in terms of percentage. So it's not going to look great for Essendon. Obviously, they're in a really tough spot right now. They're playing at Marvel. They do play a little bit better at Marvel. Obviously, they played at the MCG last night against Richmond. So it's not going to be... I wouldn't say it's the easiest game, but it is a game that the Giants can look at to build percentage on. Because obviously the week after, obviously on the Friday, is the Sydney Derby, the Battle of the Bridge against the Swans on Friday night, which I will be attending that game. I've already bought tickets. I've bought tickets for myself and my dad, so we've all sorted that out. Obviously we'll be going to the game. We've sorted out accommodation as well, because we'll be staying there. But it's going to be a great atmosphere. We're on the upper deck. We're on the upper deck in an NG Stadium, so it is going to be pretty packed out in terms of the game. So it's going to be great. They've opened up the top, so there's going to be a lot of people at this game. It's going to be very important for the Giants, obviously, because they build towards next month ahead. Obviously, they have Essendon on Thursday night, which could be a percentage boosting game. Who knows at this point? Essendon could play well. Obviously, we're playing away from home. But you'd think the Giants would have the leg over them. The Sydney Derby is after that. Obviously, you never know, because it's obviously 7th and 10th right now. Obviously, the Swans will not move, haven't moved yet because they haven't played yet. Then we have the Western Bulldogs on the Thursday at Marvel Stadium, so we'll be going from Melbourne to Sydney and then back to Melbourne. And then we'll be going to Canberra the week after on the Sunday against North Melbourne. So, and that's before we head into the Gold Coast to play against the Suns. And then obviously we have the game against St Kilda, but we don't know what day and what the time will be for that. I'd say probably maybe a Saturday game. I think it depends on obviously the Suns and Essendon game that is still going to go on at this point, because they play, obviously the Suns play on the Saturday against the Giants on August 16th. So they have a situation where obviously they're playing, so they're going to play like 3 games in the space of like 10 days or so. I'd say it's going to look weird, obviously with that game being missing. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but obviously the run home isn't the most favourable for the Giants. Obviously we've got the Western Bulldogs who are in the mix. The Swans, especially if they win today, they're still alive. They have those slim chances of making it to the finals, but obviously a lot of teams around like the Giants or Freo or Western Bulldogs will have to really kind of drop a couple of games as well. Even like Hawthorn, I think it's around that mix as well. Geelong with their loss, obviously their final top 4 finish for finals is a bit under jeopardy as well, because obviously the Suns, if they win, can jump in to the top 4 next week if Geelong lose again. So it's very interesting. Obviously, it was going to be a tough game for both teams, because it is a situation where the team that lost was going to be under a lot of pressure. And even then, Geelong could still miss finals. Obviously, their draw is kind of favourable for them. It's one of the easier draws to go on. Obviously, they play the Saints next week as well. So it depends on how the Saints look today, especially because they've had really good games. Obviously, they had a really good game against Fremantle, where they almost beat Fremantle. They played relatively well against Collingwood, and then kind of got blown out. But they've had moments where they've had wins against teams, including like that Melbourne Demons win in the top end. So that's great for them. But it's going to be an interesting last few rounds, because Essendon, Swans, Western Bulldogs, North Melbourne, Gold Coast, and St Kilda. It's probably an easier draw than a few other teams, obviously, but we'll see what happens. But win's a win, and a win at home is great. 26-point win against the Cats, and looking good towards September. But obviously, finals not confirmed as of yet, but just got to keep on winning, and we got to win by a decent margin in most of those games. So, and if we lose, we got to lose in a close one, because every win's important. Every point that goes up and down in terms of percentage is all more important, because it will probably come down to that at the end, and maybe a win might push someone out completely, and their percentage will let them down at the end of the season, because it's looking like it's a 9-horse race. But if the Swans do win, they will go to 32 points. Obviously, the Western Bulldogs are on 40, so it'll be a little bit difficult for the Swans to make a break in there, but obviously they're going to win a lot of their games coming up, because they're already 3 games behind. Obviously they're still going to play today, but if they lose today, it's 3 wins behind the Western Bulldogs. So that will almost be like a death knell against the Saints. But you never know. You never know what happens. But 26-point win over the Geelong Cats for the Giants, and looking good. And well, it's Monday morning. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm usually up early. This Monday in the particular part of the fortnight, because I've got to work in about an hour and a half. So I'm going to get up early, have brekkie before I obviously head off to work. But yeah, we got some disappointment on Sunday, and it wasn't the men's team, or at least part of it was the men's team, but it wasn't the worst part. So let's talk about the women first, because they played first, the doubleheader, and it was a 44-4 loss at home against the Broncos. I watched about 20 minutes of this game, and watched probably the last 15 minutes. But I think once Tamika Upton scored her first try, and they let in like about 3 or 4 tries in the space of like the first 20 minutes, I wasn't watching the game anymore. I was watching the AFL, despite my Giants playing on Saturday, because the games were much more exciting on the Sunday than this game. And there's not many positives to take out of this. Obviously, Jamie Chapman was out. A late out with hamstring tightness, I believe was what was written in the article. So a lot of young players in this team, and even more so, there were some last week as well. And very much like the Cowboys game, they did kind of step up a little bit more in the second half. Like, they didn't let in. They scored, I think, in the first 20-25 minutes. They scored as many points as the Broncos did after half time, so it was a decent effort in that regard, and they let a few tries in towards the end as well, which didn't help things. So blew out the score. They lost by 40. They're not last. They are second last though, just due to the fact that obviously the Canberra Raiders lost by 50 on Friday. They lost pretty heavily. Sorry, on Saturday rather. On the early Saturday game, they lost pretty heavily in that game, and they lost their first game pretty heavily as well. So not last, but we are pretty much last. We're even behind the Tigers, which we do play next, thankfully, in the women's game. And I think we play them away from home. Yeah, we play at Leichhardt Oval. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they can get their stuff together and play well against the Tigers, because then they got the Warriors, and then the Bulldogs after that, and then the Roosters, who obviously are the champs from last year as well. And then obviously we play the Sharks after that, the grand finalists from last year as well. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting month to see where the girls end up, because they could win against the Tigers. The Warriors are not that far in front of them. They're in 8th. They did win yesterday in the earlier game, which was good for them. Obviously, they held out the Eels in that regard, but and the Eels are in 9th, so they kind of swap positions. But we could win against the Warriors. The Bulldogs is going to be very tough, and obviously the Roosters are the Roosters. So I don't know where this team's going to be. It's going to be very interesting, but losing by 40 points at home, I mean, yes, the Broncos are up there, like they're up in the top 2. I think they are first, I believe. So if it goes up, yes, yeah. By a decent margin as well in terms of for and against. So yeah, pretty disappointing from the girls. I know there's a lot of girls that are new to this team or new to NRLW, but that's just not good enough. Like 40 point loss at home. I know it's round 2, but that's just not good enough. And speaking of losses, there was another loss to the men's team as well, but it was a 26-14 loss at home. And it's very interesting because they were behind by 12 relatively early in the second half, and for some reason it felt like they put the cue in the rack like in the last 10-15 minutes, because they didn't really pepper the Broncos, even though the Broncos made a decent amount of mistakes. Obviously the Broncos did score as well in that game, but it was just an interesting situation because like literally it wasn't something that, like, I can't explain it, because they got within 6, right, with about 20 odd minutes 20 plus minutes to go in the game. Then obviously Billy Walters scored the last try of the game with about 18 minutes left after the conversion was kicked. And they didn't really attack that much, despite the fact that, there was errors all over for the Broncos, especially that last 5-10 minutes. I think, apart from obviously AJ going for the ball at the same time that Reece Walsh did, that was really one of the only attacking plays that they kind of did in the last 10 minutes. Obviously, they did try to shift it around, and they passed in the wrong area, and then obviously there was intercepts in the first half as well that led to at least one of the tries against. And I don't know, it seemed like it was a better effort. Obviously they did step up because it was a derby, but I think that the Broncos didn't really go out of third gear and weren't playing great football, but they were playing well enough to just keep ahead of the Titans. So Yes, that does put us 2 points adrift from the Rabbitohs. Obviously, we still got to play the Rabbitohs as well. We play them in about a month's time. Play against the Tigers at Leichhardt Oval next week. So double header for the Tigers for the women's and the men's game. It looks like. In fact, let me actually see what time the women's game is. 11:50 in the morning. On the Sunday, so the women's game will be before the men's game, which is fine. I mean that is a double header, and it is a 2 o'clock game, so it is the early game of the Saturday for the men as well. But yeah, it does put us 2 points adrift, obviously, of the Titans. Who knows with the Tigers? Because obviously the Tigers they played decently well. For most of the game against the Warriors in the early game yesterday on Sunday. And they travelled to New Zealand. I was going to say North Queensland to New Zealand, and they played relatively well for about 65 minutes, and then obviously the Warriors kind of stepped up their game a little bit. Tanner Boyd looked fantastic. First game for the Warriors, actually, I think so. Yeah, good on him for obviously doing relatively well. I think actually it was actually the first game this year for him. Sorry, just got like an eyelash or a hair in my eye. But he stepped up when he needed to step up, and he played relatively well, and that's good on him to play well. It's great. It was great to see him play relatively well and kicked a lot of decent amount of conversions in that game as well. So. He was playing well. Just like he obviously had to step up because obviously Luke Metcalf being out at the moment. But yeah, it was fantastic from him. Fantastic, but not as great for obviously the Titans. They didn't lose by a lot. Obviously, they only lost by 12, which relatively compared to some of the results that we've had this year is relatively good. Thankfully, it wasn't like a team that scored 30 plus points against us. It's still 26, which is still a lot, but it could have been a lot more if the Broncos didn't drop the ball or give away penalties and make silly errors rather. But yeah, we could have played a lot better in that game. There was a couple of tries that we did bomb as well, especially the one to Groot. Obviously, Shibasaki got his hand in when defending and making a tackle, and obviously Groot kind of dropped it just over the line before he got it to the ground, so that doesn't help things, but that could have relatively swung momentum the other way, because I think we were still behind at that point. I think it was like the last 15 minutes, I think, when that happened. So yeah, so it's not too much of a deficit in terms of the deficit between the Rabbitohs and the Titans at the bottom at the moment, because we're minus 156, and the Rabbitohs, and excuse the birds in the background, cockatoos, hearing cars and stuff, and they like to squawk all the time. But yes, the Rabbitohs 129 in minus, and we are 156, so we're looking at like 20, 30 points. Obviously, we play the Tigers next week. The Rabbitohs play the Panthers. So the Panthers being in 6th yet, with a win over the Eels yesterday in the middle game of Sunday. It's going to be interesting to see if the Rabbitohs will step up for that game. I think they just come off the bye, so that's another reason why they're 2 points ahead. But it's going to be interesting because if we can snag a win against the Tigers, then it'll be great. Because out of the games that we've got left, the 2 Tigers games is the only ones that I can see that we can kind of win at this point. But who knows with the Tigers? I never know half the time with the Tigers because they're up and down and all over the place. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, not great. 26-14 loss against the Broncos at home for the Titans men. And that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team. We don't have to go over too much. Obviously, there was a lot of losses in the NRL, and including, obviously, State of Origin Game 3 for New South Wales. Lost against Queensland. And it was pretty embarrassing, honestly, as a Blues supporter, because they did not switch on for that game at all. Oh, yeah, Lomax converted two conversions on 2 tries. Like, yeah, but should have done that in game 1 and in game 2. And yes, we won in game 1, but if we converted at least 1 or 2 tries more in game 2, we would have won that game too, because we scored 5 tries to 4. So, yeah, and even then, Lomax missed a couple of conversions as well on his own on tries for the Eels yesterday as well. So, I don't know whether he was the right pick. I don't know. He just looked lost in that game. He was like one of the worst players on the field. Obviously, Nathan Cleary and Luai kind of shit the bed as well as your playmakers, but you can't expect too much when some of the other players are also not playing to the best of their ability as well. And it was very disappointing. Obviously, I think the only 2 players that kind of stepped up a little bit was Payne Haas, as he always does, as a middle forward, and Brian To'o, who had his leg injured basically even since the first game, and has played every Origin game and tried his hardest to get the Blues over the line and make an impact on the game. So doing that on one leg, I appreciate that, but yeah, it just goes down to a situation where obviously it was great few picks for the team in game 3 for Queensland, and honestly, with Cam Munster's dad passing away during the week, during the build for that game, it was always going to be difficult for the Blues to kind of rally and win the game. But they really shot themselves in the foot. It was very much like almost a repeat of game 2, especially in the first half. And Queensland were probably just as good, if not better, in many areas in terms of how they played in game 3 compared to game 2, especially with their defence. The defence was a lot better in this game compared to the last 2. So very disappointing for the New South Wales Blues. That's another series for Queensland again after winning last year's series in a decider that many people thought that we were going to lose, including myself as well. So very disappointing on that front. Obviously, it's another year where we've won the first game and we've dropped, especially during the dynasty years of the 8 in a row. For Queensland, it feels like it's very much another year that was like that in the middle stages of that dynasty run. So, yeah, pretty disappointing on that front. But I guess the Giants won against Geelong, so I'm happy in that regard. But, yeah, pretty average in terms of the NRL, and things need to change relatively quickly. And hopefully that doesn't mean that they sack the coach, because obviously there was a rumour that Des Hasler was going to get sacked immediately after the Broncos game if the Broncos won and the Titans lost. So hopefully that does not happen, but obviously it is newspaper articles, especially in Queensland, so who knows, take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, it's just pain. It's just pain. But I'm happy with the Giants, and obviously I'll see them in a couple of weeks against the Swans. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Mantas 100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care.